Hey guys. Tonight we begin with one of history's most well-kept and frankly disgusting little secrets. We're going to talk about a time when your house wasn't just your castle, but also your toilet and your neighbor's toilet. We're digging into the grim, desperate ingenuity of the medieval peasant, a topic that's far from the glittering courts and shining armor you see in movies. Forget the castles and chivalry Hollywood sold you. The truth you probably wouldn't last a single day. The past wasn't just a different time. It was a different world, with a different set of rules and a very, very different set of smells. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year of our Lord, 1325. The first thing you're aware of is not the darkness, which is absolute, or the silence, which doesn't exist. No. The first thing your brain registers as it claws its way toward consciousness is the cold. It's not just in the air. It feels like a physical presence in the room, a heavy, damp blanket pressing down on you. Every breath you draw in is a sharp, icy sting in the back of your throat, a reminder that the world outside has been seized by a winter that has no mercy. You shift, and the rustling sound is deafening in the small space. You're not in a bed. You're on a sack, a coarse burlap bag stuffed with straw that has seen better days. And by better days, I mean it was probably fresh about 2 years ago. Now, it's a compressed, lumpy mattress that offers all the comfort of a bag of rocks. It also has residence. You feel the familiar irritating itch on your leg, then another on your neck, fleas, or lice, or both. They are your constant companions, a tiny, bloodthirsty army that you share your home and your warmth with. You are not alone on this pathetic excuse for a bed. The warmth you do have comes from the other bodies pressed against you. Your mother's wheezing snore is a rhythmic counterpoint to your father's guttural cough. Your younger sister is curled into your back, her small body occasionally twitching in a dream. Privacy is not a concept. It is a luxury you cannot even conceive of. This one-room hut is your entire world, and you share it with your entire family. And the goat. You can hear it chewing its cud in the far corner, a wet, rhythmic sound that is somehow both disgusting and comforting. It means the goat is still alive, which means you might have milk tomorrow. But as you lie there, in the suffocating dark, a second realization dawns, one that pushes past the cold. It's the smell. It's always there. A constant assault on the senses that you've mostly learned to tune out. The way someone who lives by the sea stops hearing the waves. But in the quiet moments of waking, it comes back into focus. It's a complex bouquet of odors, a symphony of medieval life. There's the foundational note of damp earth, the floor beneath you. Layered on top is the greasy, unwashed scent of human bodies and woolen clothes that haven't seen clean water in months. There's the lingering, acrid tang of smoke from last night's fire pit, which has long since died out, leaving you at the mercy of the cold. You can pick out the sharp, ammonia-like scent of the goat's corner and the faint, sour smell from the covered chamber pot, which someone will have the joyous task of emptying later. But there's something else. It's a deeper, more pervasive odor. It's not coming from any one source. It seems to be radiating from the very structure of the hut itself. It's a low, musty, and profoundly organic smell. Think of a compost heap that has been left in a damp cellar for a year. It's the smell of decay, but a slow, cold decay. It's earthy, but with a deeply unpleasant, sour undertone that catches in your throat. Your eyes are useless in the pitch black, but you know exactly what the walls look like. They are a style known as wattle and daub. A simple wooden frame, a lattice of woven sticks. The wattle is packed with a thick, plaster-like substance, the daub. But this is no clean, smooth plaster. The daub in your home is a lumpy, dark, fibrous mixture. It's the color of mud and old secrets. In places, it is cracked, and you know from experience that if you pick at it, it flakes away in strange, frozen clumps. This smell, this exhale from the walls, this is the smell of home. It's the smell of winter. It's the smell of survival. To you, it's just a fact of life. But if you were to bring a modern nose into this room, it would be an overwhelming, suffocating horror. It's the kind of smell that doesn't just enter your nose, it feels like it's coating your tongue. You lie still, listening. The wind howls outside, a low and mournful sound that seems to be searching for a way in. It rattles the poorly fitted door and finds every tiny crack in those foul-smelling walls. A thin stream of impossibly cold air snakes its way across the floor, and you instinctively pull your thin, scratchy blanket tighter. And in that moment, you feel a strange, unspoken gratitude for those walls. As vile as they smell, they are the only thing standing between your family and the lethal, biting frost. They are a shield, a grotesque but effective barrier against the brutal reality of a medieval winter. The very thing that makes your home reek of slow rot is the same thing keeping your heart beating. The irony is lost on you. Of course. For you, this is just Tuesday. Or maybe it's Thursday. The days blur together in the gray twilight of winter. All you know is that soon, the faint light of dawn will begin to seep through the cracks, and the day's endless list of miserable chores will begin. And it all begins with the cold, the dark, and the inescapable, organic stench of the walls that keep you alive. To seep through the cracks, and the day's endless list of miserable chores will begin. And it all begins with the cold, the dark, and the inescapable, organic stench of the walls that keep you alive. But that smell is for later. Right now, there is a more immediate, and frankly, more urgent organic matter to attend to. You pull your thin wool tunic tighter around your body, a garment that smells vaguely of sheep, smoke, and old sweat. You slide your feet into leather turn shoes that are stiff with cold and probably haven't been properly dry in weeks. The first and most pressing task of any medieval morning is dealing with the output of the previous night. In summer, this is merely disgusting. You stumble out to the privy, a small wooden shack at the edge of your property, if you're lucky. More likely, it's just a designated trench or a communal cesspit shared by several families. It's a place you visit as quickly as possible, holding your breath against the swarm of flies and the eye-watering stench of decomposing human history. The goal is to get in, get out, and try not to think about the fact that the village well is probably only 50 feet away. It's a system that, in the loosest sense of the word, works. The waste goes into the ground, and with any luck, you don't have to think about it again until the pit is full and someone draws the short straw to dig a new one. But this is not summer. This is the dead of winter. And winter changes everything. You push open the heavy and crude door of your hovel and a wall of air so cold it feels solid hits you in the face. It stings your lungs and makes your eyes water instantly. The ground under your feet is not mud, but iron. The earth is frozen solid, a rock-hard shield that goes down farther than any shovel you own could ever hope to reach. And that is the heart of the great winter problem. Nature, as they say, calls. But in the deep freeze of 1325, the ground isn't picking up. Your trip to the privy is a new kind of miserable. The wooden seat, if you can call it that, is coated in a layer of frost that bites at your skin. There are no buzzing flies, one of winter's few small mercies. But the reason for their absence is chilling. The cesspit below you is no longer a pit. It is a monument, a solid frozen column of everything the village has collectively eaten for the past 2 months. Nothing is decomposing. Nothing is sinking. It's just piling up. Each visit adds another frozen layer to the growing or stratified sculpture of waste. It's a silent crisis, happening in every backyard, in every alley, behind every hovel. The village's entire sanitation system, which was already hanging on by a thread, has completely and utterly seized up. It's the medieval equivalent of every toilet in the city backing up at once, with the added bonus that the backup is now a permanent, frozen lawn ornament. As you walk back to your hut, you see the evidence everywhere. The communal dung heap, where animal and human waste is normally carted to eventually be used as fertilizer, is no longer a heap. It is a small mountain, a dark, lumpy glacier slowly creeping its way across the frozen field. The alleyways between the tightly packed homes are becoming narrower, constricted by the growing piles of frozen refuse that people have simply given up on carrying to the main pile. They just open their back door, toss the contents of the chamber pot, and listen for the dull, unsatisfying thud as it freezes almost instantly on impact with the existing pile. There's a strange sensory contradiction to it all. The air itself is cleaner, sharper. The intense cold suppresses much of the stench. Unlike the humid, throat-catching miasma of summer, the winter air smells mostly of wood smoke and ice. But you know what's there. You can see it. Little frozen hillocks of domestic history. You can identify your neighbor's pile by the cabbage leaves you know they had for dinner last week, now perfectly preserved in a brown, icy matrix. Privacy wasn't just a dream. Its absence was now on public, frozen display. This is more than just an inconvenience. It's a logistical nightmare. The village is slowly choking on its own frozen filth. The pathways become treacherous, not just with ice, but with frozen lumps that can turn an ankle or send you sprawling. The space to live and work is shrinking, hemmed in by the ever-growing evidence of life itself. The very rhythm of the village is disrupted. You can't dig foundations for a new shed. You can't bury a dead sheep. You can't even dig a proper hole to relieve yourself. The world is sealed shut. And so, the piles grow. Day by day, week by week. Each morning, every family in the village adds another brick, so to speak, to the great, cold, silent crisis. It's a problem that feels unsolvable. You can't burn it. You can't bury it. You can't wish it away. All you can do is wait for the thaw, a day you both long for and dread, when this entire frozen catalog of the village's winter diet will melt into a truly apocalyptic slurry. But what if you didn't have to wait? What if this ever-expanding, foul, frozen resource wasn't just a problem? You stand there, shivering, looking at the hard, solid blocks of frozen waste, glinting in the pale morning sun. It's solid, It's plentiful, and it's free. In a world where every scrap of wood is precious and every stone has to be hauled for miles, you are surrounded by a building material that literally renews itself every single morning. And as the wind finds a new crack in your wattle and daub wall, sending a razor-sharp draft across your back, a truly terrible yet undeniably clever idea begins to take shape. The idea doesn't strike you like a bolt of lightning. It's more like a slow, creeping fungus. It starts in the back of your mind, a place where other terrible but necessary thoughts live, like how much longer the salted pork will last, or whether the cough your youngest child has is the one that takes children in the winter. Your eyes drift from the pathetic patch job on your wall, a daub of mud and straw that has crumbled away, letting the wind in and land on the problem outside. It's not just a problem, it's a monument, a frozen, brown, multi-tiered hillock that grows larger with each passing day. The village midden. Your contribution is in there, as is your family's, your neighbors, and their scrawny pigs. It's a collective work of art. If art were made of misery and indigestion, normally, you avert your eyes. It's a thing to be ignored until the thaw, a seasonal landmark of shame. But today, staring at it through the gap in your wall, you see it differently. The wind that cuts through your home doesn't seem to bother that frozen mound. It is solid, immovable, an ugly, unyielding fact of winter life. And the fungal thought sprouts. What if you used the problem to solve the problem? Your first reaction is a full-body shudder, a wave of revulsion so profound it almost makes you laugh. To bring that inside, to willingly live inside a shell of, well, of that. It's the kind of idea a demon would whisper in your ear during a fever dream. It's insane. It's foul. It's a violation of some deep, unspoken rule of humanity. But then, another gust of wind knifes through the wall, and the baby whimpers in its sleep. The fire sputters, hungry for wood you don't have. And the fungal thought grows stronger, its logic disturbingly clear. What is your wall made of now? Mud, clay, a bit of animal dung, and straw, all smeared over a basket weave of thin branches. Wattle and daub. It's a centuries-old recipe for staying mostly out of the rain, but it's a terrible defense against a determined cold. It cracks, it shrinks, it crumbles. It's like trying to fight a wolf with a piece of stale bread. Now consider the alternative. You pull your thin wool cloak tighter and step outside. The cold hits you like a physical blow, and stealing the air from your lungs, you walk cautiously towards the midden. From a distance, it's just a shape. Up close, it's a geological cross-section of the village's diet. You can see frozen cabbage leaves, bits of straw, streaks of wood ash from discarded hearth fires, and the unmistakable, homogeneous brown that binds it all together. You kick at the base of it with your worn leather shoe. It's like kicking a stone. You press your hand against its side through your glove. Of course, you're not a complete animal. It's colder than ice. But it's dense. There's no give. It's a solid mass. The genius of the idea, Punodan, and the horror of it, is in its simplicity. The ground is frozen solid. You can't dig for fresh clay. The river is a sheet of ice, so mixing fresh mud is a brutal one-finger-numbing affair. But here is a vast supply of pre-mixed organic aggregate, flash-frozen by nature itself. It's already got the straw and animal dung mixed in. It's practically a ready-made building material, delivered daily. It's the medieval equivalent of a home improvement superstore, if that superstore were also a public toilet. You imagine it. You could break off chunks of this frozen slurry. You could mix it with what little mud and ash you can scrounge up. You could pack it, not smear it, into the gaps in your wall. You could build up the exterior, adding a whole new layer of insulation. A thick, dense, frozen shell around your fragile home. The cold is a predator. It stalks your family every night. It seeps through the walls, settles in your bones, and waits for a moment of weakness. And when you're fighting a predator, you don't worry about fighting fair. You use whatever weapon is at hand, even if that weapon is deeply, profoundly disgusting. This isn't just your problem. You look over at your neighbor, Cinewolf's hovel. His wall is even worse than yours. You can practically see daylight through it. And behind his home is another frozen monument, a cousin to your own. Every family has one. Every family is cold. Every family is desperate. Suddenly, the idea feels less like personal madness and more like communal salvation. It's a shared burden, so why not a shared solution? There's a strange, grim logic to it that you can't escape. You are literally surrounded by the raw materials. To ignore it would be wasteful. And in a world where waste means death, that is the greatest sin of all. The smell, of course, is the main counter-argument. Even frozen, there's a faint sour tang in the air around the pile. What would happen when you brought it into the home when the warmth of your meager fire touched it? But the question is answered by another gust of wind. What's worse? The potential smell of your neighbor's digested turnips, or the certain killing cold that's already inside. It's a simple, brutal cost-benefit analysis. You're choosing between an offense to your nose and a threat to your life. The nose, you realize it will have to get over it. You are no architect. You are no scholar. You are a peasant whose entire world is a few muddy acres and the whims of the seasons. But in this moment, staring at a frozen pile of filth, you are a pioneer, an innovator. You've stumbled upon a principle of engineering born from the absolute bottom of the barrel. It's a desperate kind of genius, the type that doesn't get written down in books or celebrated in songs. It's the genius of survival. The kind that looks at a pile of everyone's worst moments and sees a chance at making it to spring. The decision is made. You will not freeze. You will build. You will take the waste of your life and you will fashion it into a shield. And as you walk back to your hovel, a plan begins to form. A grim recipe taking shape in your mind. A grim recipe, indeed. There is no cookbook for this. No cheerful announcer walking you through the steps on a brightly lit set. There is only the biting wind, the ache in your bones, and the raw materials of your own survival. Welcome to the art of wattle and daub, Winter Edition. A seasonal specialty that no one, anywhere, has ever asked for. First, let's clarify. Traditional wattle and daub is a respectable, almost pleasant affair. You weave a lattice of flexible wood, the wattle, and then you lovingly slap on a daub made of wet soil. Clay, sand, animal dung, and straw. It's like making a mud pie the size of a house. But the key ingredient there is wet soil. And right now, the ground is frozen as hard as a landlord's heart. You could swing a pickaxe at it all day and do little more than blunt the iron and your own optimism. So, you must improvise. You must create a new kind of daub, a foul, frozen alchemy. Your first ingredient is the star of the show, the foundation of this entire wretched enterprise. You head to the designated spot, a discreet distance from the hovels, but not so far that the trip is a perilous Arctic expedition. Here lies the village privy pile. In summer, it's a buzzing, fragrant horror. In winter, it is transformed. The great frost has worked a strange magic, turning the collective daily output of your village into a solid, stratified monument of misery. It's a historical record, written in filth, a geological cross-section of the local diet. Your job is to quarry it. With a crude spade or a sharpened piece of wood, you begin to chip away at the mound. It doesn't come away in neat blocks. It shatters and splinters, sending up a fine, frozen dust that catches in your throat. The cold is so intense it almost neutralizes the smell, almost. Instead of the usual overwhelming wave, and it's a sharp, almost sterile tang of ammonia and something anciently sour. You pry loose chunks, noting the different colors and textures. Some are dark and dense from a diet of dark bread and beans. Others are lighter, looser, filled with undigested grains of barley. You try not to think about it. You are a sculptor, and this is your marble. You load the frozen clods onto a piece of hide or a crude sledge and drag them back to your construction site. Now, you need a binder. The human waste is too brittle on its own. It needs something with a bit more character. This is where the animal contingent of your village gets to contribute. You scrape the floors of the byre, where the cow and the ox spend the winter. Their manure is different. It's mixed with sodden, trampled straw, and because of the constant animal body heat, it's rarely frozen solid. Instead, it's a thick, fibrous, and profoundly pungent paste. It steams faintly in the cold air as you shovel it into a pile. This is your binding agent, your organic cement. It has the sticky ton-of-wet properties that the frozen human waste lacks, but you still need more. You need bulk. You need insulation. This is where the recipe becomes a free-for-all. You are now a scavenger, a connoisseur of garbage. Anything that can trap air is valuable. You sweep the floor of your own hut, gathering dirt, shed animal hair, and bits of chaff. You collect old, partially rotted straw that's too poor for animal bedding. You might even find clumps of wool caught on fences, or feathers from the unlucky chicken that met its end last week. Everything goes into the pile. It is the ultimate act of recycling, born not of environmental concern, but of sheer, grinding desperation. This isn't artisanal, locally sourced building material. It's the contents of a dustbin, given a second, terrible life. Now for the mixing. There is no medieval equivalent of a cement mixer. There is only you, a shallow pit, and perhaps a large wooden tub if you're extravagantly wealthy. You dump your ingredients in, the frozen, jagged chunks of human waste, the steaming, sloppy piles of animal manure, the dusty handfuls of straw, hair, and floor sweepings. At first, it's impossible to combine. It's like trying to mix rocks and porridge. You take a heavy wooden pole and begin to smash the frozen chunks, breaking them down into a coarse, icy gravel. The sound is a dull, percussive thud, 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 echoing in the frozen air. Your arms ache. Your breath plumes in front of you. As you work, the friction and the relative warmth of the manure begin to work their magic. The outer layers of the frozen pieces begin to thaw slightly, becoming slick and slimy. This is when you add the final and crucial ingredient, water, or more likely some melted snow, heated just enough over a fire to be liquid. You pour it in sparingly, too much, and you'll have a useless one, a frozen puddle, too little, and it will never combine. You're aiming for a consistency that doesn't really have a modern equivalent. Imagine a thick, gritty, fibrous slushy that smells like regret. You continue to churn and mash with the pole. When your arms give out, you get in with your feet. Your leather shoes, already stiff with cold, offer little protection. You feel the sharp edges of the still frozen pieces through the soles, and the sickening cold squelch of the manure slurry seeping in. The smell is no longer a sharp, sterile tang. It has blossomed into a complex, room-filling bouquet of everything you've put into it. It is the smell of your entire life, your entire village, concentrated into a single, revolting paste. You churn and stomp, back and forth, until the individual components begin to lose their identity, merging into one homogeneous, grotesque whole. Finally, it is ready. You look down at the pit. It is no longer a collection of disparate, disgusting things. It is now a single, unified, and even more disgusting thing. A thick, dark, fibrous slurry, steaming faintly. This is your daub. It is the culmination of your ingenuity and your despair. It is the literal waste of yesterday, transformed by the brutal necessity of today into the very walls that will shelter you tomorrow. Daub. It is the culmination of your ingenuity and your despair. It is the literal waste of yesterday, transformed by the brutal necessity of today into the very walls that will shelter you tomorrow. And now, the work begins. The sun, a pale, indifferent disk in a gray sky, offers no warmth. It only illuminates the task ahead. Before you stands the skeleton of a new home, a crude lattice of woven hazel and willow branches, the wattle stretched between a frame of rough-hewn timber. It looks fragile, a basket waiting to be filled, and you are here to fill it. This is a community event. Think of it as the medieval version of a barn raising, only instead of cheerful neighbors with hammers and fresh lemonade, you have shivering villagers with wooden paddles and buckets of frozen filth. Your neighbor, Thomas, whose cough has been a fixture of the winter soundscape, nods grimly at you. Goodwife Elspeth, her face etched with the same tired resignation as yours, hauls a hide bucket filled with a thick, gray-brown slurry. Everyone is here. It's a potluck. And everyone brought the same horrifying dish. The air is thin and sharp, and your breath plumes in front of your face. But another kind of vapor rises from the large wooden troughs where the daub has been mixed. A faint, wretched steam that carries the signature scent of your village. It's a complex bouquet. An earthy aroma of clay and damp straw desperately trying to cover a sharper, more acidic tang of ammonia and regret. You try to breathe through your mouth, but the taste is somehow worse. You dip your hands in. The cold is so intense it's like a burn. The mixture is dense, heavy, and gritty. It clings to your skin, seeping into the cracks in your chapped knuckles. It is a thick, organic concrete, studded with bits of undigested grain, animal hair, and whatever else has passed through the collective gut of your small world. You try not to look too closely. You might recognize last Tuesday's pottage. Your job is to take this substance and force it into the wattle frame. You scoop up a heavy glob, your arm muscles straining. You slap it against the woven branches. The sound is a wet, percussive thud, a deeply unsatisfying sound. You press and smear, working the mixture into every crevice, your frozen fingers clumsy and numb. Splinters from the rough willow branches dig into your palms, but you barely feel them through the cold. You work in a silent rhythm with your neighbors. Slap. Smear. Press. The only sounds are the squelching of the daub, the grunts of exertion, and the relentless and whistling wind that cuts through your thin woolen tunic. There's no lively chatter. What is there to say, John, that looks like the bit of turnip I gave you last week. Good to see it's found a permanent home. The intimacy of it all is suffocating. You are building a home for a young couple, using the literal remnants of meals you shared with them. Meals they shared with you. Meals eaten by every man, woman, and child within the sound of the church bell. Your lives are already intertwined through hunger, sickness, and prayer. Now, they are mortared together with your own waste. The children are here too. They're not spared this grim education in civil engineering. You see small figures, faces red from the cold, carrying smaller buckets of the slurry or handfuls of straw to add to the mix. It is a family activity, a perverse lesson in home economics. This is how you build a life, not with hopes and dreams, but with mud, dung, and yesterday's dinner. Slowly, painstakingly, the wall begins to take shape. The skeletal frame disappears under a thick, lumpy gray skin. You and the others smooth it over with wet hands and wooden floats, trying to create a surface that is at least nominally flat. As you work, you notice the daub is already starting to freeze solid where you applied it first. The bitter cold is your greatest enemy, but today, it is also your mortar. It locks the foul mixture into a solid, unyielding mass. Hours pass. Your back is a knot of cold, aching pain. Your hands are raw, dyed a murky brown, the filth packed deep under your fingernails. You can't feel your toes, but the hut is no longer a skeleton. It has walls. Thick, solid, insulating walls. You step inside the half-finished structure, and the difference is immediate. The wind's bite is gone. The air is still, heavy with the smell of damp clay and the inescapable, pungent odor of its primary ingredient. It is a foul-smelling tomb, but it is a tomb that blocks the wind. It is shelter. By the time the weak sun begins to surrender to the long, cold twilight, the work is done. The new home stands complete, a squat, lumpy structure that seems to have grown organically from the frozen mud. From a distance, in the fading light, it almost looks like it's made of stone, a sturdy, respectable little dwelling. But you know the truth. You helped build it. Your contribution is frozen solid inside that southern wall. Somewhere between a clump of pig hair and a neighbor's undigested peas. You and your village have raised a monument not to ambition, but to sheer, bloody-minded survival. You have taken the most useless, vile substance you produce and, through desperate alchemy, turned it into a shield against the killing cold. And as you trudge back to your own home, the smell of your work clinging to you like a second skin, you know the young couple will sleep warm tonight. Unspeakably, profoundly warm. Surrounded by the very essence of everyone they've ever known. The smell of your work clinging to you like a second skin. You know the young couple will sleep warm tonight. Unspeakably, profoundly warm. Surrounded by the very essence of everyone they've ever known. And now, you are back in your own hut. The single room that constitutes your entire world. You pull the rough woolen blanket shut over the doorway, plunging the space into a dim, smoky twilight. Outside, the wind is a physical thing, a shrieking predator trying to tear the world apart. You hear it clawing at the roof, moaning as it rips through the skeletal trees in the woods. But here, inside your walls, it is merely a sound, a distant, angry ghost. It cannot touch you. This is the absurd miracle of your home. It's the reason you tolerate the faint, ever-present odor that you stopped truly noticing years ago. It's why you don't flinch when you brush against the interior wall and it feels strangely dense, inert, and cold, yet somehow holds all the warmth of your small fire within the room. How can something so foul be so effective? It's a question a modern mind might ask. Thinking of fiberglass and insulation ratings, you don't think of it that way. You just know that a wall made of simple woven sticks and mud is a sieve for the wind. But a wall packed with this frozen slurry of everything the village has produced is a fortress. The genius is in the texture. It's not just filth, it's filth with structure. The countless bits of undigested straw from animal feed, the roughage from your own meager diet of bread and vegetables, the animal hair, the dirt, the ash, all of it creates a chaotic, tangled matrix. When this organic soup is mixed with clay and mud and packed into the wattle frame, it doesn't freeze into a solid, uniform block of ice. Instead, it freezes into a dense, complex lattice. And within that lattice are millions upon millions of microscopic air pockets. That's the secret. The same principle that makes a wool cloak warmer than a thin linen sheet. Trapped air. It's nature's finest insulator. You've simply created the world's most disgusting thermal blanket and turned it into a wall. The frozen water and mud provide the solid, wind-breaking mass, while the symphony of waste products provides the insulating air pockets. It is, in the most literal sense, a high-efficiency home. Your carbon footprint is non-existent, and your home is made of locally sourced, 100% recycled materials. You are a pioneer of green architecture, a deeply unfortunate, foul-smelling pioneer. You run a hand over the wall's surface. It's been lime-washed on the inside, a desperate attempt to seal in the smell and create a vaguely cleanable surface. But you can still feel the uneven, lumpy texture beneath the thin white coating. The wall doesn't steal your body heat the way a stone wall would. A stone castle is a tomb of cold in the winter, constantly sucking the warmth out of everything. Your humble walls do the opposite. They hoard every scrap of heat from the central fire pit. The smoke curls up to the hole in the thatched roof, but the precious warmth remains, bouncing off the dense and organic walls, creating a small bubble of survivable air. The quiet is another strange benefit. The sheer density of the walls muffles the outside world. The constant coughing from the hut next door is softer. The screaming of your neighbor's hungry baby becomes a dull thud. The howling wind is demoted to a background hum. It creates a false sense of privacy, a quiet, insulated cocoon where you can almost forget that the very substance of your neighbors is just inches from your head. Of course, the price for this warmth and quiet is paid through your nose. The smell is a complex thing. It's not the sharp, aggressive stench of a fresh privy. It has aged, matured. It's a deep, earthy, slightly sour smell, like a compost heap that has given up. It's the baseline scent of your life. It infuses your clothes, your hair, your food. When you travel to the next village for market day, people can likely tell exactly where you're from, and perhaps what your entire village ate last harvest, just by the aroma you carry with you. It is the signature scent of your community. You accept it, because the alternative is unthinkable. To be cold in this world is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence. To feel the relentless, biting wind seep through the cracks in a poorly built wall is to feel your life being slowly stolen. Every night, people in lesser huts simply go to sleep and do not wake up. Their bodies found stiff and cold in the morning, a thin layer of frost on their blankets. But not you. You will be warm. You will lie down on your straw mattress, sharing the space with your family and perhaps a few valuable chickens. And you will listen to the storm rage outside your disgusting, miraculous walls. The vile material is a shield. It is a monument to desperation and a testament to the grim reality of survival. It is the physical manifestation of a terrible choice. Would you rather be clean and frozen, or filthy and alive? For you and for everyone in your village, the answer is packed solid all around you. It keeps you breathing. It keeps your children from succumbing to the cold in their sleep. It is, for all its unspeakable vileness, a profound and life-giving comfort, a comfort that comes with a cost you can't yet see, a danger lurking silently within the very material that promises you one more sunrise. But that sunrise is still hours away. For now, there is only the dark, the cold, and the smell. You lie on your straw pallet, listening to the slow, steady breathing of your family packed in the small room around you. The fire has died down to a few sullen embers, glowing like a malevolent eye in the gloom. The warmth they provided is gone, replaced by a deep, penetrating chill that seeps in from the floor, from the roof, and most of all, from the walls. And as the last of the wood smoke scent fades, the other smell takes over. It's always there, a low, constant note in the symphony of your life, but it's loudest in the dead of night, when the air is still. It is the smell of your neighbors. It's a strange thought, one you don't even consciously form anymore. It's simply a fact of life. Your home is not an isolated fortress. It is a shared vessel. The wattle and daub that separates you from the family next door, the one with the perpetually coughing father and the crying baby, is composed of the same village-wide midden heap as your own. Your walls contain their history, their meals, their illnesses, and their walls contain yours. Privacy isn't a concept. It's a word from a language you've never heard. You don't need to press your ear to the wall to know what's happening in the hut beside you. You can smell it. You know when John the Fletcher's family had a bit of luck and managed to get some salted pork, because the smell of your shared wall changes subtly for a few days after. It's richer, heavier. You know when old Ilara is sick, because a sour, medicinal tang of herbs and illness clings to the northern wall of your home. It's the medieval version of a social media feed, only instead of seeing curated photos of a happy life, you get an unfiltered olfactory report on your neighbor's digestive and general health. And there is no block button. You roll over, pulling the thin wool blanket tighter around your shoulders. The wall is just inches from your face. In the faint moonlight filtering through a crack in the shutter, you can see its rough, uneven texture. A piece of straw pokes out here, a darker smudge of something. Is there? You've learned not to look too closely. You've learned not to think about it. But in these quiet, cold hours, the mind wanders. You remember the day the community gathered to daub this hut. The biting wind, the grim-faced men and women scooping the frozen slurry from the communal pit, packing it into the woven lattice of the walls. You remember seeing a half-eaten turnip, perfectly preserved, being plastered into the frame of what would become your sleeping area. You sometimes wonder where it is now, resting silently just beyond your head. This intimacy is absolute, a bond forged of necessity and filth. You don't have neighbors in the modern sense. You have cohabitants of a single, sprawling, organic structure. The village isn't just a collection of huts. It's one large, interconnected system, breathing the same air, sharing the same ground, and built from the same collective waste. The sounds are part of it, too. A muffled argument from one side, the rhythmic thump of someone weaving on a loom from the other. The sounds are muted, distorted by the dense, frozen material as if you're hearing them from underwater. But the smell cuts through everything. It's the first thing you notice in the morning and the last thing you register at night. It tells you things. The scent near the baker's hut is different, faintly yeasty, even through the overwhelming bass notes of human existence. The wall you share with the tanner, well, that's a punishment from a wrathful god. A foul, chemical sharpness that mixes with the standard miasma to create something truly breathtaking. Your home's particular aroma becomes a part of your identity. A stranger could walk into your village, blindfolded, and know who was a blacksmith and who was a farmer, just by the subtle variations in the stench emanating from their walls. It is the aroma of social status, of profession, of diet, and it fosters a strange sort of empathy. When you hear the baby next door wailing for the third hour straight, you feel a surge of irritation. Yes, but you also smell the thin, watery scent of cabbage broth that has been their only food for a week, and the irritation is tempered with a shared, weary resignation. You are all in this together, quite literally. Your lives are packed into the same foul mortar. You shift again, your back aching. The cold from the wall seems to be reaching for you, a physical presence in the room. This structure, this grotesque recipe of survival, is what stands between your family and a frozen death. It holds back the wind. It traps the precious heat from your meager fire. It is, in its own unspeakable way, a comfort. But as you lie there, breathing in the stale, recycled air of your village, a new thought, cold and sharp, cuts through the sleepy haze. This constant, cloying intimacy, this forced sharing of air, of sickness, of life, it means you are never truly safe. You are breathing in not just the memory of your neighbor's meal, but the very essence of their health. Their coughs are your coughs. Their fevers are your fevers. The wall is not a barrier. It's a conduit, a silent, frozen network connecting every breath, every sickness, every living soul in this fragile, foul-smelling place. The very thing keeping you warm is also a perfect vessel for something else, a silent killer nestled in the dark, waiting patiently for its moment. Every living soul in this fragile, foul-smelling place, the very thing keeping you warm is also a perfect vessel for something else, a silent killer nestled in the dark, waiting patiently for its moment. At first, you don't think about it. You can't afford to. The wind outside howls like a starving wolf, and the ice on the puddles is thick enough to stand on. Inside your one-room home, the air is thick and heavy, but it's not freezing. The fire in the central hearth spits and crackles, and your curious, grotesque walls do their job. They absorb the meager heat and hold it, creating a pocket of survivable air in a world determined to freeze you solid. You feel a sense of smug security. You've outsmarted the winter. You've taken its worst weapon, the cold, and turned it against itself, using it to freeze your home into a solid, insulated fortress. But a fortress is meant to keep enemies out. You've accidentally locked the most dangerous one inside with you. It starts subtly. A cough from your youngest child that doesn't go away. You blame the smoke from the fire, which hangs in the air like a permanent, stinging fog. Then your wife complains of a churning in her gut. She blames the salted fish from last week, which was perhaps a bit too salty, or not salty enough. You yourself feel a constant, weary ache in your bones that sleep doesn't seem to fix. This, you decide, is just the price of being alive in winter. Life is hard. Your body is tired. Look, it's normal. It is not normal, you see. Your walls are more than just a mixture of mud, straw, and frozen human waste. They are a thriving, bustling metropolis of microscopic life. Think of it as the world's most disgusting terrarium. In this dark, damp, and nutrient-rich environment, things are growing, things you cannot see, things you have no name for, and things for which you have no defense. Germ theory is a fantasy, centuries away from being conceived. To you, sickness is a matter of bad air, an imbalance of the humors, or perhaps divine punishment for that time you thought an impure thought about your neighbor's prize-winning pig. The idea that your walls, your very shelter, are a carefully constructed breeding ground for disease is an absurdity you couldn't possibly comprehend. But your body comprehends it. Every breath you take is filled with invisible spores from molds that bloom in the damp corners where the wall meets the earthen floor. When you lean against the wall for a moment's rest, you are pressing yourself against a solid block of dormant bacteria. Parasitic eggs passed from your neighbors and frozen into a state of suspended animation are just waiting for a slight shift in temperature, a moment of contact. They are patient. More patient than you. Your immune system, already weakened by a meager winter diet of dried beans and coarse bread, is putting up a valiant but losing fight. It's like a single village guard trying to hold off an entire army that has already slipped through the gates. The fevers come and go. The stomach cramps become a regular, unwelcome guest. You watch your family, their faces pale in the flickering firelight, and a cold dread that has nothing to do with the temperature outside begins to creep into your heart. The village wise woman comes by. She nods sagely, mutters about curses and ill omens, and gives you a poultice of goose fat and dried nettles to rub on your child's chest. It makes the hut smell marginally different for an hour, but the rattling cough remains. There are no antibiotics. There is no understanding of contagion. You simply pray. Huddle closer to the fire, and try to ignore the fact that the very walls of your home seem to be silently, malevolently watching you waste away. The irony is almost too cruel to bear. The structure built from the collective refuse of your community is now methodically poisoning that same community from the inside out. It's a closed system of filth and sickness. What goes into the privy pit in summer eventually comes back into the home in winter, not just as a building material, but as a biological weapon you've aimed squarely at yourself. The worms that plagued you in August are now frozen in stasis within your walls, just inches from where you sleep, waiting for their chance to return. The dysentery that swept through the village after the harvest festival didn't disappear. It's merely hibernating. You lie on your straw pallet at night, listening to the sounds of the hovel. The wind whistling through the thatch roof. The gentle snores of your wife. The wet, persistent cough of your son. And if you listen closely, you might imagine another sound. A low, imperceptible hum. The sound of billions upon billions of tiny organisms nestled in their frozen fecal paradise. simply waiting. They are not evil. They are not intelligent. They are just life, doing what life does, surviving, multiplying, and seizing every opportunity. And you have given them the greatest opportunity of all. You have built them a palace, invited them inside, and locked the door behind them. The cold is the only thing holding them back. It is a temporary truce in a war you don't even know you're fighting. But winter, as you well know, does not last forever. Spring is coming. And with it, the thaw is the only thing holding them back. It is a temporary truce in a war you don't even know you're fighting. But winter, as you well know, does not last forever. Spring is coming, and with it, the thaw. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no great flood, no dramatic collapse on the first warm day. History, especially the disgusting parts, prefers a slower, more intimate kind of horror. It begins with a sound. For weeks, the only sounds have been the wind, the crackle of your meager fire, and the persistent coughing from the cot next to you. But now, there's a new sound. A gentle, almost pleasant drip. Drip, drip. You think it's just snow melting from the thatch. It's a hopeful sound, a sign that the endless biting cold is finally losing its grip. You are, of course, tragically mistaken. The first casualty of spring is your denial. A few days later, you notice the smell is changing. The familiar, static aroma of cold, compacted filth, a smell you've grown so accustomed to you barely register it, is developing new notes. It's becoming more active, more ambitious. It has a wet, earthy character now. A richness that speaks of decomposition finally waking up from its long winter nap. Your walls, the very structures that saved you from freezing to death, and are beginning to exhale. And they are exhaling the ghost of every meal, every sickness, and every desperate biological act of the last 4 months. You press a hand against the wattle and daub. In the heart of winter, it was as hard and unyielding as stone. Now it has a slight give to it, a clammy, sweating texture, like cold clay. It feels alive, and not in a good way. The ice crystals that acted as the binding agent, the frozen glue holding this whole foul enterprise together, are surrendering. The truce is over. The bacteria are awake, and they are hungry. The single drip you heard last week has been joined by friends. A chorus of slow, thick plinks and plops echoes quietly in your one-room home. You look up and see a dark, greasy stain spreading across the interior thatch near where it meets the wall. A single viscous brownish drop gathers itself, hesitates, and then falls with a soft pat onto the dirt floor. You stare at it. It's not water. It's the slow, horrifying liquidation of your own home. This is the great, unspoken horror of your clever winter solution. Your fortress of frozen filth is becoming a fortress of mud. But it isn't just mud. It's a concentrated, slowly melting slurry of everything the village has produced. It's the medieval equivalent of finding a forgotten container at the back of the refrigerator, opening it, and realizing with dawning dread that you now have to live inside it. As the days get warmer, the process accelerates. The walls no longer just feel clammy, they are visibly weeping. Dark streaks run from ceiling to floor, tracing the path of least resistance through the straw, dung, and human waste. The air grows thick and heavy, saturated with a humidity that smells vaguely of a privy and a graveyard. You can't escape it. You sleep in it. You eat your thin, watery pottage in it. The very air you breathe is a misty aerosol of your dissolving house. The structural integrity, once so reliable in its frozen state, becomes a constant source of anxiety. You'll be sitting by the fire when a soft, squelching sound from the corner makes you jump. A section of the daub, having lost its frozen reinforcement, has slumped downwards, bulging like a rotten vegetable. You poke it with a stick, and the stick goes in with a stomach-turning schlorp. You decide it's best to leave it alone. It's a load-bearing wall, after all, or at least, it was. Outside, things are even worse. The entire village is undergoing the same grotesque transformation. The paths between huts, which were treacherous ice, are now a churning mire. But this isn't just spring mud. This is mud enriched with the slow ooze from 100 weeping homes. Every step is a gamble. Your worn leather shoes sink into a pudding of filth, and the stench that rises with every footfall is breathtaking. You watch your neighbor, John, desperately trying to patch a particularly bad section of his wall. He's slapping fresh clay onto a section that's sagging like a wet blanket, but it's a losing battle. The liquefying material behind it just pushes the new clay off. It's like trying to put a bandage on a waterfall of sludge. He gives up, curses God, and retreats inside, leaving the wall to its slow, inevitable collapse. The Great Thaw is a time of profound contradiction. The world outside is coming back to life. You see the first green shoots pushing through the mud. You hear birds you haven't heard in months. The sun has a genuine warmth to it for the first time since October. It should be a time of relief and celebration. But you are trapped in a decaying box of your own making. The very thing that ensured your survival is now threatening to drown you in its putrescence. The warmth you prayed for all winter is now your enemy, patiently and methodically dismantling your home, one disgusting drop at a time. And as you lie on your straw pallet, trying to ignore the damp chill emanating from the weeping walls, you hear another sound, a soft, scraping sound from inside the daub. The rats, you realize, have found that the walls are now soft enough to tunnel through. Spring, it seems, has arrived for everyone. You hear another sound, a soft, scraping sound from inside the daub. The rats, you realize, have found that the walls are now soft enough to tunnel through. Spring, it seems, has arrived for everyone. But the rats are just the heralds. The true sign comes later that night. You're curled under a thin wool blanket, trying to ignore the gnawing in your stomach and the persistent itch on your scalp. Then you feel it. A single cold drop of water on your forehead. You flinch, wiping it away with the back of your hand. Your first thought is the roof, another leak in the thatch. Another miserable night spent shifting your sleeping pile of straw to a drier, but likely colder, part of the floor. You sigh, a small cloud of steam in the air, and look up into the darkness. But you can't hear the familiar patter of rain on the roof. The night is still. Then another drop hits your cheek. This one feels heavier, thicker. You sit up, your joints protesting. Your eyes adjust to the sliver of moonlight filtering through a gap in the shutters. You trace the path of the moisture not upwards, but sideways. To the wall. The wall is crying. Where yesterday it was a solid, frozen block of mottled brown and gray, it now has a dark, greasy sheen. A patch near the corner looks wet, almost black in the faint light. As you watch, Another droplet gathers, swells, and falls with a soft plink onto the dirt floor next to you. This is the great unspoken horror of spring, the annual reckoning. The very thing that kept you from freezing to death all winter now begins its slow, horrifying transformation. The great thaw isn't just happening in the fields and forests, it's happening 3 feet from your face. The first thing that truly changes is the smell. For months, the cold locked away the worst of the stench, reducing it to a dull, earthy background note you almost stopped noticing. Now, as the ice crystals within the daub begin to melt, the dormant bacteria wake up, and they are very, very hungry. The scent of decay restarts with a vengeance. It's a complex and layered aroma, a terrible potpourri of the entire village's winter diet. You can almost pick out the individual notes: the sour tang of human waste, the ammonia-rich punch of animal dung, the musty sweetness of rotting straw and vegetable peels. It's the ghost of every meal, every illness, every biological function from the last 4 months, reanimating in a slow, gaseous wave that fills your small home. It seeps into your clothes, your hair, the very taste of the stale bread you chew for breakfast. By the end of the week, the single drip has become a chorus. Your home now has its own unique and miserable soundtrack. The steady plink, plink, plop of water seeping from the walls. It's a medieval water torture, each drop a reminder of the filth encasing you. The sound is inconsistent, coming from different spots at different times, so you can never quite get used to it. Sometimes it's a fast trickle. Other times it's a slow, thick ooze that makes a squelching sound as it hits the floor. The floor itself is a new landscape of misery. The packed earth near the walls, once hard and cold, is now a slick, dark mud. A foul-smelling bog is forming at the base of your home. You learn to walk a careful path through the center of the room, your every step a calculation to avoid the worst of the sludge. Touching the wall is now completely out of the question. What was once a hard, rough surface is now yielding and clammy. If you were to press your finger against it, it would give slightly like cold, damp clay. A smear of brown grime would cling to your skin, the smell clinging for hours. You live in a constant low-grade state of disgust, careful not to lean back, not to brush against anything. Your house, your only sanctuary from the world, has become a porous, weeping membrane of filth. It's the medieval equivalent of living inside a giant, slowly defrosting block of frozen sewage. You watch as dark streaks, like mascara running down a cheek, stain the interior from ceiling to floor. These are the channels where the moisture is flowing most freely, carrying with it a concentrated slurry of dissolved history. That dark line running near the hearth, that might be the night the entire village feasted on old mutton. The lighter brown one by the door, a bad batch of ale from December. Your walls are telling a story you'd much rather forget. And then come the flies. The first drowsy buzz of the season is a sound of pure dread. They are drawn to your weeping home as if it were a great, decomposing beast. They land on the damp patches, feasting. They land on you, on your food. Their legs carrying microscopic particles of your neighbor's digested history. This isn't a disaster, it's a season. It's an expected part of the turning of the year, as natural as the budding of leaves on trees. You don't fix it, you endure it. You watch your house weep and sag, hoping the daub doesn't slump out of the wattle frame entirely. Sometimes chunks do fall off, splatting onto the floor in a wet, fibrous heap, releasing a fresh plume of stench and revealing the grotesque matrix within. As the days grow warmer, a new color begins to appear on the dampest parts of the wall. Small, fuzzy patches of green and black. Mold. It blooms with an artist's subtlety at first, a faint speckling in the darkest corners. But it spreads with unnerving speed, a living tapestry of decay growing on the very surface meant to protect you. The house isn't just crying anymore. It's getting sick, trickling in the darkest corners. But it spreads with unnerving speed, a living tapestry of decay growing on the very surface meant to protect you. The house isn't just crying anymore. It's getting sick. And because you live inside of it, that sickness is now yours. You don't have words like bacteria or virus. Such concepts are centuries away, the stuff of wizardry. To you, sickness comes from bad air, a miasma, or perhaps a punishment from God for a thought you had last autumn. You understand cause and effect, but the cause you see is invisible, spiritual. The effect, however, is brutally, physically real. It starts with your youngest child, a cough. At first, it's just a dry little bark, easily dismissed. But it doesn't go away. Soon it becomes a wet, rattling sound that seems to echo from the damp walls themselves. You place your hand on their small back and you can feel the vibration. A tiny, struggling engine drowning in its own fluids. The air in your one-room home is thick. It's a foul soup of smells: damp earth, human sweat, wood smoke, and now, the musty, sweet scent of mold. You breathe it in with every mouthful of thin porridge, with every prayer you mutter before collapsing onto your straw mattress. Think of it as the world's worst essential oil diffuser, constantly atomizing fungal spores and microscopic life into your lungs. You try to air the place out, opening the wooden shutter over the hole that serves as a window. But the breeze that comes in carries the smell of your neighbor's melting home, which is identical to your own. You haven't opened a window. You've just connected your sick room to theirs. Then your stomach begins to churn. It's a familiar, unwelcome guest you call the flux. It twists your gut into knots, sending waves of fire through you. You stumble outside to the simple latrine pit, a journey you'll make a dozen times before the sun is high. You feel weak, your head swim, and every muscle aches. This isn't a simple bug. This is your body being systematically poisoned by your own home. The very walls that shielded you from the winter's killing frost are now waging a slow, biological war against your insides. The chain of infection is insultingly simple. A drip of putrid water from a weeping wall splashes onto the dirt floor. Your only chicken, pecking for scraps, walks through the resulting puddle. Later, you handle the chicken to collect its precious egg. You don't wash your hands. Why would you? The water in the bucket is murky, and soap is a luxury you can't even imagine. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which is already stiff with yesterday's grime. And then you break your coarse bread for the morning meal. You have just personally delivered the sickness from your wall directly into your mouth. Congratulations. And it's not just you. The entire village is a laboratory for disease. Every hovel is undergoing the same grotesque transformation. The collective cough of the village becomes the soundtrack to the spring. It's a more reliable sign of the season than the bird song. The shared well, where everyone draws their water, is just a stone's throw from several melting homes. The contaminated runoff seeps into the ground, a slow-motion poison pill for the entire community. One person gets sick, and soon the illness ripples through every family. As predictable as the tide, you watch as the village elder, a woman who uses herbs and poultices, tries her best. She makes a bitter tea from yarrow to fight the fever. She applies a moss dressing to a festering sore on your neighbor's leg, a sore that began when he scratched a flea bite with a dirty fingernail. Her intentions are good, but it's like trying to put out a forest fire with a cup of water. The problem isn't a lack of yarrow. The problem is that you are all living inside a compost heap. Dysentery, which you call the bloody flux, sweeps through the lanes, leaving children and the elderly frighteningly hollowed out and pale. The relentless coughing turns into something worse, a lung fever that makes every breath a searing pain. Skin ailments are rampant. Rashes, boils, and weeping sores appear as if from nowhere, born from the constant, intimate contact with filth. Your home isn't just a shelter, it's a petri dish. And you, your family, your neighbors, you are the culture. The irony is almost too cruel to bear. In the dead of winter, you huddled inside, grateful for the frozen, solid walls. You felt safe. You were protected from the howling wind and the lethal cold. You survived. But survival, your learning, comes at a terrible price. The payment is due in the spring. That solid and life-saving barrier of frozen waste was just a loan from nature. And now the collection agent has arrived. It doesn't knock. It seeps. It drips. It grows in the dark. The very thing that kept you from freezing to death is now patiently, methodically, trying to kill you from the inside out. Ent has arrived. It doesn't knock. It seeps. It drips. It grows in the dark. The very thing that kept you from freezing to death is now patiently, methodically, trying to kill you from the inside out. And yet, you become strangely accustomed to it. This slow, creeping dread, this invisible threat, is just another texture of life. But as you step outside your own weeping hovel for a gasp of what passes for fresh air, you notice something. It's a subtle shift in the breeze, a different note in the symphony of decay that is your village. Sickness may be the great equalizer, but filth, you realize, has a distinct social hierarchy. You learn to read the air like a nobleman reads a book. It's a skill you never asked for, a kind of olfactory literacy that tells you everything you need to know about your neighbors. You don't need gossip. You don't need to peek through their one tiny window. You just need to breathe. Every home in this village has its own aromatic signature, a scent profile that is as unique and telling as a coat of arms. It is the aroma of social status. Walk past the hut of Old Man Hemlock, the one who lives at the very edge of the village, the one who lost his fields to a bad harvest and his wife to the flux. Take a deep breath. It's a thin, sour smell. It speaks of a diet of little more than boiled cabbage, watery pottage, and the cheapest, coarsest black bread. The waste that makes up his walls is simple, homogeneous, and profoundly sad. It's the smell of desperation, of a body running on fumes. There's no complexity or no richness. It's the scent of bleak survival, a monotonous, earthy rot that clings low to the ground. This is the bottom rung. This is the smell of having nothing left to give, not even to the very walls that shelter you. Now wander down the lane, towards the center of the village. The air changes. You pass the cottage of John the Fletcher, the man who makes the arrows for the Lord's hunt. Close your eyes and inhale. It's different. It's still vile. Make no mistake. But it's a more robust vile. It's deeper, More complex, you can detect the ghosts of yesterday's meals. And they were better meals than old man hemlocks. There's a faint, greasy undertone that hints at meat. Not a whole roast, of course not, but scraps. Bits of pork fat, a boiled knuckle bone, the memory of a stew with actual substance. You can smell the ghosts of onions, the faint tang of turnip, maybe even the sourness of spilled ale. His walls, as they begin their slow spring melt, are releasing a richer story. It's a story of a skilled trade, of a few extra pennies earned, of a life that is still a desperate struggle but is not yet a lost cause. His stench is a quiet boast. It says, I can afford a little fat in my diet. It says, my family is not starving this winter. In a world with no banks, no resumes, no social media profiles to carefully curate, the very funk of your home is your credit score. It's your public declaration of worth, wafting on the breeze for all to judge. This is your world's most honest form of communication. There is no lying. You can't pretend your diet is rich if your walls smell of watery cabbage. You can't fake the smell of prosperity. It's the medieval version of parking a new cart in front of your hovel, only far more visceral. You are, quite literally, living inside your own tax return. And you, standing in the middle of the lane, you can read it all. The baker's hut has a strange, sour, sweet smell, a mix of his family's waste and the ever-present scent of yeast and spoiled flour that has seeped into the very soil. The tanner's home, set a little apart from the others, carries an unholy blend of human misery and the chemical sharpness of the tanning process, a smell so uniquely awful it serves as its own kind of fence. Each profession, each level of success, each private struggle, is made public knowledge with the first warm front of the year. It's a village directory written in a language of decay. Then, you turn your gaze towards the slightly larger house on the small rise near the church. The Reeves house. The man who manages the Lord's estate. You walk closer, tentatively. And the most shocking thing you notice is not what you smell, but what you don't. You don't smell the familiar, sickeningly sweet stench of thawing human waste. His house is timber-framed, with properly mixed daub of clay, sand, and straw. It might even have some stone in its foundation. The air around it smells of wood smoke from his well-tended hearth. It smells of beeswax from the candles he can afford. On a good day, you might even catch a whiff of roasting meat, real meat, not just the memory of it. The absence of that one pervasive smell is the ultimate luxury. It's the loudest and most profound statement of power in the entire village. His status isn't defined by a richer, more complex stench. It's defined by the lack of it. It's a silent, aromatic wall separating his world from yours. He doesn't have to live inside his own biological history. He doesn't have to fear the spring thaw. His walls won't weep. His home doesn't tell a story of digestion. It tells a story of domination. You stand there, a connoisseur of squalor, able to discern the subtle differences between abject poverty and mere hardship. You can identify the scent of a good week, a neighbor getting a bit of bacon, and the scent of a bad month, the thin, reedy smell of hunger. The aroma of social status isn't just a curiosity. It's a constant, oppressive reminder of your exact place in the world. A world where the greatest ambition is to one day, somehow, simply smell of nothing at all. Social status isn't just a curiosity. It's a constant, oppressive reminder of your exact place in the world. A world where the greatest ambition is to one day, somehow, simply smell of nothing at all. And that dream, the dream of smelling of nothing, doesn't arrive on a white horse with a proclamation from the king. It doesn't come from a change in the law or a sudden burst of enlightenment. Progress, you learn, is not a grand announcement. It is a quiet sound, heard at a distance. A sound you don't even have a name for at first. It is the steady, rhythmic chink, chink, chink of iron on stone. It starts at the edge of the village lands, where the Lord has decreed a quarry will be opened. For most of you, it's just another burden. More dust, more noise, more carts churning the path into a liquid mess of mud. You watch sullen men, their backs already bent, spend their entire lives chipping away at the earth, freeing pale gray slabs of rock. At first, this stone is a fantasy. It is for the new wing on the manor house, or for reinforcing the church walls so God can feel a bit more secure. You see the massive, groaning carts pulled by exhausted oxen, dragging this impossible wealth past your hut, and you feel a familiar, bitter envy. A stone house. You might as well dream of having a house on the moon. Stone doesn't freeze, crack, and weep in the spring. It doesn't hold the ghosts of last month's cabbage stew. It just sits there, solid and arrogant in its permanence. But then, something else begins to happen. The slow march of progress isn't just about massive stones for the wealthy. It's about smaller, more humble victories. Down by the river, where the clay is thick and good, a man with more ambition than sense builds a kiln. A squat, ugly mound of earth and brick that belches a constant, acrid smoke. He digs the clay, mixes it with sand and straw, and presses the thick slurry into wooden molds. He bakes these mud rectangles until they are hard as rock and the color of dried blood. He calls them bricks. At first, it's a curiosity, a failed farmer's foolish project. Who would pay for baked mud? But then the reeve, the Lord's local enforcer, buys a cartful to build a proper floor in his cottage. No more damp earth underfoot. Then the blacksmith, flush with coin from shoeing the Lord's horses, builds a new chimney and hearth, a magnificent structure that funnels most of the smoke outside. The idea begins to simmer in the village consciousness. This isn't like the stone from the quarry, a material reserved for God and his divinely appointed landlords. This is man-made. This is attainable. You start to think in different terms, not in terms of replacing your whole house. That's a madman's dream. But maybe you could trade a few chickens for a handful of bricks. Just enough to build a small, unraised hearth in the center of your hut. A place where the fire can sit on something that isn't just packed dirt. A place that holds the heat a little longer through the night. The first time you lay those rough, warm bricks, your hands feel as if they are shaping the future. They are heavy, solid, and smell only of earth and fire. It is the most beautiful smell you have ever known. This is how it begins. A piece at a time. A generation-long home renovation project. One year, you managed to trade your second-best pig for a small pile of off-cut stones from the quarry. The ones too small or misshapen for the manor. You spend a miserable autumn digging a shallow trench and laying a crude foundation along the northern wall. The one that bears the brunt of the winter wind. You pack the gaps with a mortar of mud, lime, and horsehair. The following winter, you notice the difference. The cold seeping up from the ground is less severe. The wall doesn't seem to groan as much. It's a small victory, but it's yours. Meanwhile, the very sound of the world is changing. The constant dull thud of an axe splitting logs is joined by the higher-pitched song of a two-man saw. Proper timber, straight planks, are becoming a commodity. Instead of weaving a lattice from flimsy hazel branches for your wattle, you might be able to buy a few solid posts. Your house can stand straighter, taller. The roof might sag a little less. The idea of a solid wooden door, instead of a stretched animal hide, starts to feel less like a flight of fancy and more like a goal. The smell of fresh sawdust, sharp and clean, occasionally cuts through the village's usual miasma of smoke and manure. It smells like wealth. It smells like stability. Social pressure begins to shift. For centuries, every hut was a variation on the same theme of cold and filth. But now, differences are becoming visible, tangible. The family with the brick chimney is seen as being clever, forward-thinking. The family with a single stone wall is considered solid, dependable. Your own home, with its familiar organically insulated walls, starts to feel less like a practical necessity and more like a sign of your failure to advance. It's the medieval equivalent of everyone else getting a fancy new carriage while you're still pushing your belongings around in a squeaky wheelbarrow. Your house, once a source of grotesque winter comfort, is becoming a source of shame. You will not live to see the project finished. Progress is too slow for one lifetime. But you will be the one who laid the first stones. Your son, having grown up without the biting drafts from the north wall, will be the one to save for years to replace the eastern wall with rough-cut timber. He will learn the art of daubing, using a proper mixture of clay, sand, and straw, a recipe notably free of human effluence. He will curse the weeping southern wall every spring, just as you did. But he will see it not as an inevitability, but as a problem with a foreseeable solution. And perhaps your grandson will be the one to finally tear down that last, foul-smelling section of the original hut. He will swing the mattock, and the frozen, dung-laced plaster will shatter and fall away, releasing a final ancient stench of his ancestors' desperation. And in its place, he will lay clean, new bricks, and he will sleep in a house that, for the first time in his family's history, is made entirely of earth and wood and stone. A house that does not weep in the thaw. A house whose smell is its own. He will have achieved the great dream of his forefathers. His home will, at long last, smell of almost nothing at all. And stone, a house that does not weep in the thaw, a house whose smell is its own. He will have achieved the great dream of his forefathers. His home will, at long last, smell of almost nothing at all. 700 years later, you kneel in the mud, trying to find the ghost of that smell. The air around you is clean, crisp, smelling of damp earth and crushed grass. A gentle, persistent drizzle darkens the soil in your carefully excavated trench. You pull the hood of your waterproof jacket a little tighter, feeling the plastic crinkle against your ear. Your world is one of precise measurements, of string grids and color-coded buckets. Your tools are delicate trowels and soft bristled brushes, instruments of near-surgical cleanliness used to dissect centuries of filth. You are looking for a house, not a grand castle with foundations of stone, but a simple peasant's hovel, a place that was, by its very nature, designed to dissolve. The wooden posts have long since rotted into nothingness. The roof of thatch is now just a slightly darker layer of humus, and the walls have simply melted back into the earth from which they were so disgustingly assembled. To an untrained eye, your trench is just a square of mud. But you see the subtle shifts in color. You see the faint, dark rectangles in the soil, the post holes where the timber frame once stood, now filled with softer, richer earth. And between them, you see a long, discolored stain. It's a faint, greasy-looking smear in the clay, barely distinguishable from the surrounding ground. This is your prize. This is the echo. You haven't found a wall. You found the chemical memory of one. You carefully scrape a small sample of the stained soil into a sterile plastic bag. You label it with a black marker, a modern form of sorcery your medieval subject could never comprehend. Later, back in a lab that smells of antiseptic and ozone, machines will analyze this pinch of dirt and tell you its secrets. The primary chemical you're looking for is phosphorus, specifically unnaturally high levels of phosphates. In the natural world, phosphate levels are fairly consistent. But in the world of human history, they are a giant, glowing billboard that screams, people were disgusting here. Disgusting. Phosphate is a key component of organic waste. All of it. The animal manure from the pigs and chickens, the discarded scraps of food, and most importantly, the endless supply of human excrement. When you build a house by packing a slurry of frozen feces and mud into its walls, you are essentially creating a chemical battery. For decades, that wall stands, a monument to intestinal fortitude. And when it finally melts, when the spring thaw turns it into a weeping, slumping mess, it doesn't just disappear. It leaches its very essence into the ground below. It's the ultimate chemical fingerprint. The soil becomes permanently saturated with the waste of the people who lived there. The ground itself becomes an archive of their digestion. Back in your lab, the results from the mass spectrometer flicker onto a screen. The graph spikes. The phosphate levels in your sample are hundreds of times higher than the control sample taken just a few meters away. You found it. The spectral footprint of a daub wall. You can now map the entire village, not by finding ruins but by following these invisible chemical stains. You can trace the outline of each home, each animal pen, each walkway, creating a blueprint of the town written in ancient molecular filth. It's a bit like creating a floor plan for a party by mapping where all the drinks were spilled. But it gets more intimate, more unsettling. By analyzing other trace elements, you can begin to reconstruct their diet. High levels of nitrogen and specific isotopes might point to a diet richer in meat. Perhaps this was the home of the village reeve. Lower levels, indicative of a mostly grain-based diet, tell the story of a poorer family, surviving on pottage and prayers. The soil beneath their long-vanished feet is now a ghostly Yelp review of their life's menu, and then you find the other things. You place a diluted sample of the soil under a high-powered microscope. Floating in your view, perfectly preserved by the anaerobic conditions of the clay, are tiny, oval shapes. They look like infinitesimal lemon seeds. They are the eggs of intestinal parasites, whipworm, roundworm, liver fluke. You are staring at the very real, physical evidence of the constant, grinding discomfort that defined their lives. These tiny, calcified survivors have waited in the dark for 7 centuries, a silent testament to the invisible killers breeding in the very walls that kept a family warm. You can almost feel the phantom itch, the dull ache in the gut, the gnawing hunger that was never truly satisfied because of the unseen thieves living inside them. There is a profound and dark irony in your work. You wear latex gloves to handle the soil they lived and breathed. You use expensive, sterilized equipment to analyze the contamination they could never escape. Your greatest academic triumph, the discovery that will get you grant funding for another year, is the confirmation of their deepest misery. You go back to the trench the next day. The rain has stopped. You kneel down again, your knee pads sinking into the soft earth. You run your gloved finger along the dark stain that marks the base of the vanished wall. The soil is cool and damp. You lift your hand and, almost unconsciously, bring it closer to your face. There is no smell, of course, not after all this time. Only the clean, peaty scent of earth. But you can imagine it. You can almost feel the ghost of that ancient, overwhelming stench on the air, the smell of wood smoke, wet wool, and the inescapable sour aroma of 100 neighbors' digested histories, all packed together to keep out the cold. The house is gone. The people are gone. The smell is gone. But the evidence, the stain, the microscopic passengers, they remain, an echo in the soil, waiting for someone to come along and read the vilest story ever told. The people are gone. The smell is gone. But the evidence, the stain, the microscopic passengers, they remain, an echo in the soil, waiting for someone to come along and read the vilest story ever told. And that story is a legacy written in filth. It's a chapter of history that doesn't make it into the glorious paintings of knights and fair maidens. You won't see it reenacted at the local Renaissance fair, nestled between the turkey leg stand and the artisanal mead tent. They conveniently leave out the part where the charming rustic cottage you're admiring is, in fact, insulated with the collected bowel movements of the entire village. History, as you're often told, is written by the victors, but more accurately, it's curated by the comfortable. We like our past to be a bit dusty, perhaps a little muddy, but ultimately heroic and understandable. We want to imagine ourselves as the lord in the castle, not the peasant in the weeping hovel. We prefer the tales of grand battles and political intrigue to the quiet, desperate stories of daily survival. Because daily survival was, for most of humanity's existence, utterly disgusting. This wasn't a failure of character. It was a triumph of desperation. Imagine you are that peasant, facing down another winter. The wind doesn't just whistle through the gaps in your wall, it screams. It's a physical predator, stealing the warmth from your children's bodies as they huddle under a single, threadbare blanket. Every calorie you consume is precious, a tiny furnace against the encroaching frost. And outside, another problem is growing. A frozen, stinking mountain of your own waste. You have no landfill, no public works department, no magical plumbing to spirit it all away. You have a problem that is piling up, literally. To us, it's an unthinkable sanitation crisis. To you, it's just Tuesday. But then, a flicker of genius, the kind of genius that is only born when you have absolutely no other options. The kind that looks at two deadly problems, the cold getting in and the waste piling up, and sees a single, gruesome solution. It's the ultimate form of recycling, a concept we're very proud of today, though our version usually involves less typhoid and a bit more curbside convenience. You realize the very thing that plagues you in the summer, the filth, can save you in the winter. When frozen solid, it is substance, it is mass, it is insulation. We forget this part of our story because it's embarrassing. It punctures the balloon of our self-importance. We like to think of human progress as a clean, upward march of innovation fire. The wheel, the aqueduct, the smartphone. We don't like to acknowledge the long, messy detours. The chapters where progress meant packing your family's excrement into your walls to keep from freezing to death. It feels unseemly. A step backward. But it wasn't a step backward. It was a desperate lunge sideways, a scramble to stay on the board game of existence. The people who built these homes weren't stupid or primitive. They were engineers of the abject. They were chemists of the profane. They understood the properties of their materials' organic matter. Straw, mud, and water, frozen into a dense, insulating brick that could mean the difference between waking up in March and being buried under the snow in January. This is the legacy that is truly buried. Not the gold of kings, but the ingenuity of the common person pushed to the absolute limit. It's a reminder that for most of history, life wasn't about thriving. It was about not dying. And you used whatever you had at hand to achieve that goal. Today, your greatest household problem might be a weak Wi-Fi signal. Your problem was how to build a wall that wouldn't kill you before the cold did. So we tell ourselves the sanitized stories. We build our pristine historical dramas where the peasants are poor but clean. Their teeth are miraculously white, and their cottages, while humble, seem to have been built by a quaint, rustic designer. We scrub the story clean of the stench, the sickness, the weeping walls, because the reality is too much to bear. It reminds us that our own comfort is a fragile, modern invention. It reminds us that the line between civilization and utter squalor is terrifyingly thin. And for centuries, our ancestors lived right on that line, building their homes from the very stuff of it. The echoes of that life are still there, in the high phosphate counts in the soil where a village once stood. It's a chemical signature of survival, a quiet testament to the fact that people lived here. They fought here, they suffered here, and they used every foul tool at their disposal to see one more sunrise. That is a legacy more powerful than any crown or castle. It is the story of humanity not at its best, but at its most determined. A story written, quite literally, in filth. And now, as you lie there, let that story fade. Let the image of the frozen and weeping walls dissolve into the darkness of your room. The desperate fight for warmth is over. You are not in a hut of wattle and daub and things best left unspoken. You are in a warm, dry bed. Feel the solid, silent walls around you. They hold no secrets. They do not smell of your neighbors. They do not carry the ghosts of yesterday's meals or the seeds of tomorrow's plague. Think of the simple, miraculous weight of your blanket, a shield against a cold that is safely outside, managed by a quiet hum from your furnace or the silent work of your radiator. There is no icy slurry to mix, no communal pile to visit. The problems of your day are washed away with clean water that appears as if by magic from a tap, and disappears just as easily. This profound, absolute comfort was a fantasy more outlandish than any dragon or sorcerer to the people in our story tonight. It is a luxury they could not even conceive of. Breathe in the clean air of your room. It carries no stories, no warnings, no sickness. It is just air. Let the desperate ingenuity of the past fall away. Let the filth and the fear and the cold recede. There is nothing for you to solve tonight, nothing to build, nothing to survive. There is only rest. Sweet dreams.